Hey folks, this is Kelani. We're almost there. By the time this week comes to an end, we'll have all the information we can absorb about our favourite Blizzard games and where they're going to be in a few months' time. If everything goes to plan, at any rate. BlizzCon starts this Friday, and as the Horde, Alliance and Heroes of Sanctuary, Overwatch, the Nexus, and of course the Hearthstone Tavern all cram themselves into the Anaheim Convention Center, I'm sure we'll all be waiting with bated breath to see what magic is coming our way. Hopefully it's magic, because if this BlizzCon doesn't turn out so well, I can't help but feel it would spell disaster for a few Blizzard's games, the World of Warcraft included, but the chaps over at Blizzard usually save the good stuff for their own convention, and we should get a few pieces of exciting news at the very least. They're working on more games than ever, a few new games that haven't been talked about yet. WoW should be getting some later patch information, Overwatch might be getting a new hero or two, Diablo might be one of the new games. We should walk away with at least something to be excited about. So, what do you want from BlizzCon 2018? Are you invested in multiple games, or are you following just for the WoW news, or just for the Diablo news maybe? Is there anything specific you would absolutely love to be announced at this year's BlizzCon? Let me know in the comments section below and we can all have a good chat about what we think we might see. As for me, I'm really excited for a variety of reasons. The first is that BlizzCon doesn't usually disappoint. The one year that Blizzard felt like they didn't really have anything for us, they just didn't bother putting on a show. That hasn't happened since 2012. And since then, we've typically had a pretty exciting BlizzCon every year. So I'll keep my fingers crossed that we're going to get at least one big announcement out of the show. Hopefully that should be enough if the rest isn't up to par. I'm also excited to see what happens with Diablo, as they've been given a prime time spot for their What's Next panel, and it's about time we saw something new come out of the Diablo universe. But let's stick to the World of Warcraft for now, because that's what I know best and what I'm most excited for. What could we get to further our little adventure in Azeroth, and what could we learn about where we're heading? I think at this point we sort of know what's happening towards the start of patch 8.1. The Alliance and Horde conflict boils over, and the events of the first new raid in 8.1 will handle the climax of that. I'm guessing we won't stop there, and the story will eventually continue in a future patch. That's what we might end up learning about at BlizzCon. 8.1 is more or less set in stone, I would think, all except the Crucible of Storms bit. We know there's going to be another raid introduced in patch 8.1, and it's going to be quite a bit after the events in the battle for Desert Lore. We also know that it's called the Crucible of Storms, it's going to have very few bosses, and it will deal with some of the story points over in Stormsong Valley. All of the Tide Priests going bonkers, the old gods crawling their way into any weak minds they can find, and some sort of deal with Azara has been struck. The Crucible of Storms should explore those story points and hopefully shine a spotlight on what's been going on and what it could mean for our future endeavours in Kul Tiras and Zandalar. That's probably the only part of 8.1 that I would be interested in hearing about at BlizzCon, a little tease or two about what happens in the raid or where the story takes us from there, and then straight on to what comes next. If the panel just talks about 8.1 over and over again, I would actually be a little worried. It's a little weird to talk about the next patch before we even have 8.1 on live servers, assuming of course that the patch doesn't go live today, which by the looks of it won't, but you never know. We haven't been able to fully explore that patch, or really explore it at all, so getting us all excited and hyped for the patch after 8.1 does seem a little preemptive maybe, but what else is there to talk about? Anything and everything that's on the PTR for patch 8.1 has been drilled through by the typical culprits. If it's been data mined, a lot of people might already know what's going on. Sadly, I don't think there's a win-win situation here with the patch being released so closely to 8.1, no matter how you look at it, and I think the dev team will want to hype us up about something at the very least. To that end, I would love to see where we're going next. Will 8.2 be Nazjatar and Azara? Will it be something else related to the old gods, or will we take a bit of a vacation from the typical expansion themes and solve some other threat that pops up out of the blue? I would love to get some information, or even a little tease, just to confirm where we'll be heading next in our Battle for Azeroth adventures, partly to give us an answer to that very question so we can stop speculating so much about where we're going and start speculating about what we'll be doing once we get there. As part of that, I would love for a new form of content or a new system to be talked about, something that isn't tied so closely to AP or our artifact, something that isn't a vehicle for random rewards like the island expeditions or warfronts. I'm not sure what else they could really squeeze in at this point though. They definitely seem to have tried to cram a lot of stuff into the expansion, but half of it isn't really worth playing through multiple times, and a lot of players seem sick of various activities already. I know they're actively working on that, and we have a new warfront and 2 new islands coming in patch 8.1, but I think the expansion could really use something fresh, something that isn't tied to the systems which have turned people off a little bit, so they can sink their teeth back into the game without getting immediately put off by having to jump through some artifact power hoops or having to run around a few islands to get some of the newest rewards. Where better place to hype up a new form of content than BlizzCon? I would also like to see something announced for PvP vendors to be worked back into the game. Whether it requires a new currency or a little tweak to the way honor is earned, it doesn't really matter to me, just something which gives us a solid answer that players who enjoy PvP will have some way to earn the rewards they want, because obviously they understand totally random rewards aren't really that fun. That's the reason why they're giving us an Azeroth armor vendor in patch 8.1, so we can work towards a reward, even if it takes significantly longer to obtain the one piece we really want. Having something to aim towards and grind towards, if that's what you really want to do, is always valuable. Goals are valuable in an MMO, and we haven't really had many obtainable goals to pursue which are related to gear for a while now. And I know that vendors aren't always the answer, but they sure as heck beat RNG. That's probably why we're also getting a vendor for the island expedition rewards, or at least some of them, and a vendor tied to the warfront system, so you can earn a currency to spend on a variety of little goodies to encourage you to play the warfronts more than once a week, or once every 4 weeks, however it ends up turning out. PvP is also the only form of content in BFA that doesn't actually have a vendor at this point, and it's perhaps the form of content that's begging for it the most, so seeing that at BlizzCon would be honestly a great plus. Tying into what I was talking about earlier, I hope we get a little bit of story out of BlizzCon this year. The Warbringer series did a decent job of setting up the expansion, and the Queen Azshara cinematic seemed to tell us a little too much, a little too early. We've been left wondering for so long, but BlizzCon is the perfect opportunity to give us the next piece of the puzzle. How do our actions tie together? Where does the Alliance stand after the assault on Dazar Allure, and what happens to the Horde now? Another sacked city, another wound from the Alliance. I'm really excited to find out what happens next, and maybe what happens after that. I guess it depends on how far they really want to take things at BlizzCon, but if we're really skipping over patch 8.1 for these 2 days to talk about what comes next, we could find out so much more about where the battle for Azeroth is actually heading. But perhaps more than anything, I really want a twist in this story. We're all gearing up to head down to Nazjatar to deal with Queen Azshara and then somehow deal with N'Zoth. That might not be this expansion, we might have to wait until the next one to really take the fight to the last old god on Azeroth, but that all seems too straightforward and simple. I really hope there's a twist in this story before we get to N'Zoth. We're kind of on the rails at this point, and instead of a smooth roller coaster, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that there's going to be a few loop-de-loops along the way. Maybe that's not something I would like to see at BlizzCon though. The twists are always most fun when we don't see them coming a mile away. Although with data mining the way it is these days, we don't really get to keep the surprises hidden for too long. Either way, I'm looking forward to a whole new section of lore and story to guide the way through this expansion. And I think that's kind of it, for WoW at least. I hope we get to see a little bit of what our raids might look like in 8.2, or whatever ends up being discussed, but at least a little peek into the Crucible of Storms to see how that's shaping up. But I wouldn't be too surprised if they kept that kind of thing a little more under wraps. As for the rest of the Blizzard portfolio, I think I'm most excited about the Diablo news that's going to come out of this year's BlizzCon. I know a lot of Diablo fans were hoping for a Diablo 4, and their hopes sort of got shattered just a little bit when they were told to calm down in a blue post. That's never a good sign, so I think the popular opinion at this point is that a Diablo 4 probably isn't in the books for this BlizzCon, which is really disappointing. A Diablo 4 announcement would 100% trump any WoW news that could come out of BlizzCon for me, and it really seems like it's not going to happen. But Diablo is the first What's Next panel. It's got that big spot right after the opening ceremony, so something's got to happen. Whether that ends up being the comic book stuff, the Netflix series that's been rumoured recently, an entirely new game relating to Diablo, or some hints at a potential Diablo 4, I really just don't know at this point. I just hope that it's not going to be all about Diablo 3 for the Switch, because that would be so abysmally lame and cast a giant shadow over the rest of the convention. If that's their highlight, their big news, Oh boy, that would be bad. I'm still really excited though, I can't help myself. Something new from the Diablo team is definitely something I'm going to be interested in. Past that, I think the only thing that could excite me more is an announcement of a new IP that Blizzard has been working on and keeping hush-hush, or a new game that we haven't heard about in one of our current universes. I know a few people expecting some form of Diablo mobile game, or a new Overwatch single-player mode, but anything new at this point could be really cool to see, especially when we don't really have any openings in the schedule to announce this kind of thing, except for the opening ceremony. A new game is always exciting, and the last few times Blizzard has come out with a new game, it's been done incredibly well. Failing everything else, absolutely everything else, if we don't get Diablo 4, if we don't get any new patch information for World of Warcraft, if Overwatch doesn't get any new heroes, if nothing else happens during this BlizzCon, I hope that we at least get a new cinematic from somewhere. I don't care what game it is, I just want some more eye candy to rewatch a few times on YouTube, because Blizzard cinematics are still some of the best to date. I've lost count how many times I've rewatched the WoW expansion cinematics, and even some of the hero cinematics from Overwatch. Even Hearthstone has a few cool cinematics now. I hope everything else does happen, but I want to see a few cinematics in there as well. So that's what I want to see from BlizzCon this year. What about you? More story? More content? More games? What are you most excited for? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. Let's have a good old chinwag down there. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. You can see their names floating by on screen. If you want to join these lovely guys and gals, you can find a link in the description below. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always, I will see you next time.